The night air over Jerusalem carries a curious stillness. Not silence. Cities like this are never truly silent, but the gentle hush that settles when thousands of weary souls have finally surrendered to sleep. Somewhere below the moonlit walls, a mule shifts its weight against worn cobblestones. A watchman clears his throat. Oil lamps flicker behind wooden shutters, casting thin ribbons of golden light into narrow alleys that twist through one of the oldest cities on earth. Above everything rises the great platform once crowned by Solomon's Temple, a place where history and faith have become so tightly woven together that separating one from the other is almost impossible. If you listen carefully, you might imagine the echoes of countless footsteps layered across centuries. Roman soldiers marching in iron sandals, Jewish priests ascending sacred stairs, Byzantine monks whispering prayers before dawn, Muslim scholars crossing cool courtyards with scrolls tucked beneath their robes, Crusader knights clattering awkwardly beneath heavy mail. Every generation believed it stood at the center of history. Every generation eventually became another whisper carried away by the wind. Tonight, though, our story belongs to a very particular group of men. Men who dressed in white cloaks stitched with bright red crosses. Men who took vows of poverty while eventually controlling fortunes larger than many kingdoms. Men who promised never to fear death, although death found them with remarkable consistency. They were called the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. History remembers them simply as the Knights Templar. And if there has ever been an organization capable of inspiring both sober scholarship and wonderfully outrageous conspiracy theories, it is surely them. Give humanity 900 years, and somehow a small brotherhood of medieval monks can become guardians of the Holy Grail, protectors of secret bloodlines, keepers of hidden treasure, inventors of modern banking, founders of secret societies, and, depending on which late-night television documentary you happen to watch, possibly custodians of everything except perhaps Atlantis itself. Reality, as usual, is both less magical and far more fascinating. Because the Real story begins not with hidden treasure beneath Scottish chapels or mysterious coded maps buried beneath oak trees, but with something surprisingly ordinary. Fear. Fear is one of history's greatest architects. Fear builds walls. Fear raises armies. Fear changes governments. And during the years after the First Crusade, fear walked almost every road leading toward Jerusalem. To understand why the Templars appeared at all, we must leave behind the legends and return to Europe at the end of the 11th century, a continent that looked very different from the one we know today. Imagine standing on a hill somewhere in northern France around the year 1090. There are no nations in the modern sense. No France as we recognize it. No Germany. No Italy. Instead, the landscape is divided among hundreds of feudal lords whose borders shift almost as often as their loyalties. Small castles crown lonely hills. Villages cluster around churches. Fields stretch beneath gray skies, worked by peasants whose lives change little from one generation to the next. Most people will never travel farther than 20 miles from where they were born. For them, the world beyond neighboring forests exists mostly through stories. Stories brought by wandering monks, traveling merchants, pilgrims, occasionally exhausted soldiers. Books are rare. Maps are unreliable. News moves no faster than a horse. Rumors move considerably faster. Life itself is astonishingly uncertain. Harvests fail. Disease returns every few years. Children often do not survive infancy. War is not an interruption to peace. War is simply another season. And yet, despite these hardships, faith touches nearly every corner of daily life. Church bells organize the hours. Saints fill conversations. Relics attract pilgrims from distant lands. The promise of salvation is not merely comforting, it is essential. Heaven is real. Hell is equally real. The line separating the two feels frighteningly thin. Now imagine hearing that the city where Christ walked, preached, died, and rose again lies under foreign rule. For centuries, Christian pilgrims had journeyed to Jerusalem with relatively little difficulty under Muslim governments. Conditions varied depending upon politics and local rulers, but the pilgrimage itself remained possible. Then circumstances changed. The Seljuk Turks expanded across much of the Middle East during the 11th century, defeating Byzantine forces at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. The Byzantine Empire, once the eastern giant of the Christian world, suddenly found itself losing enormous territories. Cities fell. Trade routes shifted. Pilgrims encountered growing dangers. Stories spread throughout Europe. Some were accurate. Others became greatly exaggerated with every retelling. Such is the nature of human storytelling. A merchant robbed outside Antioch becomes an entire caravan slaughtered. A difficult journey transforms into an impossible one. Reality quietly gives way to legend. Meanwhile, in Constantinople, Emperor Alexios I Komnenos faced an increasingly desperate situation. His empire had survived Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, internal rebellions, ambitious generals, and enough palace intrigue to fill several modern television dramas. Now Turkish armies threatened lands that had belonged to Byzantium for centuries. Alexios needed soldiers. Western Europe possessed many. Perhaps, he thought, these Western knights might be persuaded to help. So envoys traveled west. Letters were written. Requests made. What happened next exceeded nearly everyone's expectations. In November 1095, Pope Urban II gathered church leaders and nobles at Clermont in France. Thousands assembled. The weather was cold. The crowd enormous. Urban delivered one of history's most consequential speeches. We do not know his exact words. Several chroniclers recorded versions afterward, each emphasizing different details. But the message was unmistakable. Aid the Christians of the East. Liberate Jerusalem. Take up the cross. The response astonished even the Pope. Across Europe, men stitched cloth crosses onto their clothing. Nobles mortgaged estates. Peasants sold livestock. Families prepared for journeys that stretched thousands of miles. Some sought genuine spiritual redemption. Others desired land, adventure, status, forgiveness, perhaps all of those together. Human motivations rarely fit neatly into one category. And so began the First Crusade. It was not a single organized army. It resembled several massive waves moving independently across Europe toward the eastern Mediterranean. Some groups were disciplined. Others resembled wandering crowds. Many suffered hunger before ever reaching enemy territory. Disease claimed thousands. Arguments erupted between leaders. Logistics collapsed with depressing regularity. Because organizing tens of thousands of people across continents without modern communication turns out to be extraordinarily difficult. Who could have guessed? Yet somehow, despite setbacks that would have broken many expeditions, the crusading armies pushed onward. Across mountains, across rivers, across unfamiliar kingdoms, into Anatolia, toward Syria, toward Jerusalem. The campaign lasted years. Cities were besieged. Alliances shifted. Victories alternated with disasters. The Siege of Antioch became almost mythical for those who survived it. Starvation reduced proud knights to eating horses, then dogs, then leather. Some accounts even speak of darker measures too unpleasant for bedtime conversation. History, regrettably, has never been particularly considerate of bedtime. Still they continued. Driven by belief, desperation, momentum, and perhaps the growing conviction that after traveling so unimaginably far, turning back seemed impossible. Finally, in June of 1099, Jerusalem appeared upon the horizon. Imagine that moment. Months, even years, of marching, fighting, praying, burying companions, crossing deserts, climbing mountains. Then suddenly there it stood, stone walls glowing beneath the summer sun. The city that existed in sermons, scripture, and dreams. Many reportedly wept at the sight. Not everyone wept for the same reason. Some saw salvation. Others saw conquest. Some simply saw the end of an exhausting journey. The siege began. It lasted little more than a month. On July 15, 1099, crusading forces breached Jerusalem's defenses. What followed remains among the darkest episodes of the Crusades. Contemporary chroniclers describe widespread killing throughout the city. Christians, Muslims, Jews. The scale remains debated by historians, but there is little doubt that enormous bloodshed occurred. Medieval warfare often ended brutally after successful sieges. Jerusalem proved no exception. Victorious crusaders walked through streets transformed into scenes of horror. One chronicler, riding triumphantly, described blood reaching riders' ankles. Modern historians generally regard such descriptions as literary exaggeration rather than literal observation. Still, exaggeration is unnecessary. The reality was terrible enough. Yet from this violence emerged something entirely new: the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Against astonishing odds, Western European Crusaders had established Christian states in the Levant. Jerusalem now possessed a Latin king. European nobles received lands. Castles rose across hills overlooking roads and valleys. Pilgrims from Europe rejoiced. The Holy City was once again accessible, at least in theory, because conquering a city is one challenge. Keeping it is another altogether. The Crusader kingdom stood surrounded by powerful Muslim neighbors. Its population remained relatively small. Its armies were limited. Its supply lines stretched across the Mediterranean. Every road outside fortified walls carried uncertainty. Pilgrims soon returned in growing numbers. Old men fulfilling lifelong promises. Young nobles seeking adventure. Women traveling despite remarkable dangers. Entire families crossing seas simply to kneel where they believed Christ had walked. Many completed the pilgrimage safely. Many did not. Bandits understood precisely where travelers would be found. Small raiding parties watched lonely valleys. Roads between coastal ports and Jerusalem became especially dangerous. A pilgrim carried valuables, perhaps coins, jewelry, pack animals, supplies. Even when not wealthy, they represented easy targets. The kingdom desperately needed protection, not grand armies, not another crusade, something smaller, permanent, disciplined, men willing to patrol dusty roads day after day beneath the relentless Levantine sun. It sounds almost mundane compared with the legends. No hidden treasure, no sacred relics, just escort duty. Sometimes history changes because someone finally volunteers to perform the boring job nobody else wants. Around the year 1119, roughly 2 decades after Jerusalem's conquest, a small group of knights approached King Baldwin II with an unusual proposal. There were perhaps 9 of them, perhaps slightly more. The records are frustratingly vague. History occasionally leaves us wonderful mysteries while forgetting details that would have been immensely useful. Their leader was a French knight named Hugh of Paynes. He was not among Europe's richest nobles, nor its most famous warrior. Yet he possessed something that would prove far more valuable. A vision unlike anything medieval Europe had previously seen. These knights wished to combine 2 identities that many believed could never coexist. They would become monks and soldiers at exactly the same time. The idea sounded almost contradictory. Monks renounced violence. Knights practiced it professionally. How could one man sincerely be both? The answer would reshape medieval Christendom. And before long, the quiet streets of Jerusalem would witness the birth of one of history's most remarkable institutions. For a long moment, the proposal must have sounded almost impossible. Imagine presenting it to a room of churchmen in the early 12th century. We would like to dedicate our lives completely to God. Wonderful. And we also intend to spend much of that life carrying swords. Excuse me? For centuries, Christianity had wrestled with the uncomfortable reality of violence. Christ had preached peace. Monks devoted themselves to prayer, fasting, silence, and humility. Knights, meanwhile, earned their reputations by charging into battle atop enormous horses while wearing enough iron to sink a fishing boat. These worlds rarely overlapped. One withdrew from conflict. The other lived inside it. Yet the Crusades had changed everything. Jerusalem was now under Christian rule, but that rule remained fragile. Pilgrims continued arriving from every corner of Europe, only to disappear along isolated roads where robbers and enemy raiders waited patiently. The kingdom needed protectors who would not simply arrive for one campaign before returning home. It needed permanence. King Baldwin II understood this immediately. The king had spent years trying to hold together a kingdom that always seemed one bad harvest or one lost battle away from disaster. He knew exactly how few soldiers he possessed. Every mounted knight mattered. So Baldwin accepted Hugh of Paynes and his companions, not merely as mercenaries, not as ordinary knights, as something entirely new. The king granted them quarters inside the royal palace built upon the Temple Mount. To medieval Europeans, this location carried extraordinary symbolism. The Crusaders believed the palace occupied part of the ancient site of Solomon's Temple. Modern archaeology paints a far more complicated picture, but medieval imagination cared much less about archaeological precision than spiritual meaning. Living atop the Temple Mount transformed these humble knights into the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. Over time, almost everyone shortened that rather lengthy title. They became simply the Templars. It was a magnificent name, powerful, ancient, filled with biblical echoes, and, quite unintentionally, the first ingredient in nearly 9 centuries of myths. Because if your headquarters supposedly sits atop Solomon's Temple, people will inevitably begin wondering what secrets might lie beneath it. Hidden chambers, sacred relics, ancient treasures, lost scrolls. Human imagination requires surprisingly little encouragement. In reality, the earliest Templars lived with astonishing simplicity. At least at first, they owned remarkably little. Their order was genuinely poor. So poor, in fact, that their earliest seal showed 2 knights riding a single horse. Modern audiences often interpret the image symbolically. Perhaps it represented humility, brotherhood, shared purpose. Those meanings certainly existed. But there may also have been an element of practical reality. Horses were expensive, war horses especially. A fully equipped medieval knight required enormous resources. Mail armor containing tens of thousands of interlocking iron rings. Helmet, sword, shield, lance, boots, clothing, pack animals, servants, food, replacement equipment. One knight represented years of labor by countless craftsmen and farmers. The first Templars possessed little wealth. Their famous white cloaks had not yet become symbols recognized across Europe. Their organization consisted of only a handful of determined men patrolling dangerous roads beneath an unforgiving Middle Eastern sun. There were no great castles, no international banking system, no fleets, no legendary treasure, only dust, prayer, long hours in the saddle, and uncertainty. One can almost picture Hugh of Paynes riding quietly through the rocky hills between Jaffa and Jerusalem. The road winds through dry valleys scattered with olive trees and thorny shrubs. The sun climbs steadily higher until heat shimmers above every stone. Pilgrims travel nervously in small groups, clutching walking staffs and prayer beads. Every distant movement becomes suspicious. Every narrow pass feels dangerous. A shepherd appears on a hillside. Harmless. A merchant caravan approaches. Friendly. Then perhaps nothing. An uneventful day, which, ironically, is exactly what success looked like. Good security rarely creates dramatic stories. When no one gets robbed, history often ignores the people responsible. Fortunately for the Templars, circumstances were about to change dramatically, not because they sought fame, because one remarkable monk decided they deserved it. His name was Bernard of Clairvaux. If medieval Europe had possessed celebrity intellectuals, Bernard would have been among the brightest stars. He was a Cistercian abbot, a brilliant theologian, a persuasive writer, an advisor to kings and popes. People listened when Bernard spoke. Perhaps more importantly, they trusted him. Bernard recognized something extraordinary within this small brotherhood. He saw an answer to one of medieval Christianity's greatest dilemmas. How could a knight pursue holiness while living in a violent world? Bernard's answer was elegantly simple. Fight not for glory. Fight not for wealth. Fight only to protect others and defend the faith. In his famous work in praise of the new knighthood, Bernard contrasted worldly knights with these new warrior monks. Ordinary knights decorated themselves with bright colors, elaborate armor, flowing hair, and personal glory. Templars? They were expected to embrace humility, discipline, obedience. They fought not for themselves, but for God. At least, that was the ideal. Reality, as always, proved somewhat messier. Human beings possess an extraordinary talent for falling short of ideals. Even so, Bernard's endorsement transformed everything. Suddenly, this tiny order received something priceless: legitimacy. Then came one of the most important moments in the Templars' history. The Council of Troyes in 1129. Church leaders gathered in the French city of Troyes to consider formally recognizing the order. Imagine the atmosphere. Stone halls lit by candles. Cold winter air slipping beneath heavy wooden doors. bishops wrapped in thick robes, abbots debating theology, knights waiting anxiously. The discussions were not merely administrative. They concerned something unprecedented. Could an armed religious order truly serve God? After careful deliberation, the answer became yes. The council officially approved the Knights Templar. They received a formal rule, a detailed guide governing every aspect of daily life. Much of it sounds surprisingly familiar to anyone who has lived under strict organizational discipline. Wake at appointed hours. Attend prayers. Eat together. Dress modestly. Obey superiors without hesitation. Avoid unnecessary conversation. Do not indulge vanity. Share possessions. Maintain equipment. Care for horses. Respect fellow brothers. Even meals followed careful regulations. Silence often accompanied dining while scripture was read aloud. Food remained simple. Meat was limited. Luxury discouraged. Everything reinforced one central lesson. The individual mattered less than the brotherhood. That principle extended onto the battlefield. Unlike many medieval nobles, Templars were forbidden from charging recklessly in pursuit of personal glory. No dramatic solo heroics. No abandoning formation simply because victory looked tempting. No impulsive acts to impress onlookers. Orders came first. Always. To modern military historians, this discipline helps explain why the Templars became such formidable soldiers. Most feudal armies depended heavily upon individual nobles whose personal ambitions sometimes overruled strategic thinking. The Templars operated differently. They trained together, prayed together, lived together, obeyed together. If one brother fell, another immediately filled his place. Their discipline became legendary, not because they were fearless. Fear remains wonderfully democratic. Everyone experiences it. Rather, they learned to continue functioning despite fear. That distinction matters. One evening after approval, perhaps a young recruit arrived at a Templar commandery somewhere in France. He may have been the younger son of a noble family. Without inheriting land, his future looked uncertain. Now he stood before experienced brothers wearing plain habits beneath white cloaks. The ceremony would have been solemn. Questions asked. Vows taken. Promises made. He pledged poverty, chastity, obedience. He surrendered personal wealth, individual ambition, even aspects of his former identity. From that moment forward, he belonged entirely to the order. His cloak symbolized purity. The red cross later added to it symbolized willingness to shed blood if necessary. There was remarkable beauty in the simplicity. There was also immense sacrifice, because joining the Templars meant accepting a life with remarkably few comforts. Forget lavish castles filled with endless feasts, at least in the beginning. Daily existence followed a strict rhythm. Prayer before dawn, training, administrative duties, guard duty, horse care, weapon maintenance, travel, more prayer, simple meals, sleep, repeat, day after day, year after year. Even clothing reflected discipline. No bright colors, no extravagant decorations. Hair remained relatively short. Beards became characteristic. Everything discouraged vanity. Ironically, these efforts to appear ordinary eventually made them instantly recognizable. One white cloak with a red cross became more famous than the jeweled armor of countless kings. As new recruits joined across Europe, donations began arriving. Small at first. A vineyard here. Several fields there. A mill. A few silver coins. A nobleman's estate. Many benefactors believed supporting the Templars earned spiritual merit. Others admired their mission. Some hoped powerful warrior monks might pray for their souls after death. Medieval people invested heavily in eternity. The order accepted these gifts gratefully, because protecting pilgrims required resources. Horses needed feeding. Armor required repairs. Castles demanded maintenance. Ships cost money. Nothing in history is quite as expensive as running an organization, especially one spread across continents. Gradually, commanderies appeared throughout France, England, Spain, Portugal, Italy, the Holy Roman Empire. Each estate produced income, grain, wine, livestock, rent. Every harvest strengthened the order. What began as 9 poor knights slowly evolved into an international institution. Yet despite growing wealth, the brothers stationed in the Holy Land continued living close to danger. Every patrol beyond fortified walls carried genuine risk. The Kingdom of Jerusalem remained surrounded by rival powers. Small skirmishes erupted constantly. Raids, ambushes, border disputes. The frontier never truly rested. For the Templars, peace was often merely the brief pause between alarms. Still, amid all this uncertainty, they built a reputation unlike any other military force in Christendom. Pilgrims began recognizing the white cloaks with relief. Merchants trusted their discipline. Kings admired their courage. Popes increasingly relied upon their loyalty. The Brotherhood had grown from a handful of obscure guardians into one of the most respected organizations in Europe. But respect, like wealth, has a curious habit. It attracts attention. And attention, sooner or later, attracts ambition. For now, however, the Templars remained what they had always hoped to become: guardians of dangerous roads, defenders of the Holy Land, and monks who carried swords not because they loved war, but because they believed peace sometimes required men willing to stand between pilgrims and those who wished them harm. They could not yet know that within another century, their greatest battles would no longer be fought against armies beyond Jerusalem's walls. Instead, they would face something far more dangerous: politics. And history has always been far less merciful than the battlefield. The years passed almost unnoticed, as years often do. One spring blurred gently into the next. Olive trees flowered and shed their blossoms. The winter rains softened the hard earth before the relentless summer sun baked it once again into pale stone. Pilgrims continued arriving by ship at the ports of Acre and Jaffa, their faces weathered by weeks upon the Mediterranean. Some stepped ashore singing hymns. Others simply kissed the ground. Many had dreamed of this journey since childhood. Many would remember it for the rest of their lives. And somewhere along those dusty roads, beneath a brilliant blue sky or beneath a moon that seemed close enough to touch, white-cloaked horsemen quietly watched over them. It is tempting to imagine the Templars as warriors who spent every waking moment charging heroically into battle. Films often portray them that way. A knight apparently cannot ride peacefully through a valley without dramatic music swelling in the background. Reality was slower, much slower. Most days involved routine: long patrols, inspection of horses, repairing harnesses, checking wells, escorting travelers, writing inventories, receiving supplies, praying at fixed hours. History is built far more often through routine than through spectacle. If you had visited a Templar fortress on an ordinary afternoon, you might have been disappointed by how normal everything appeared. The courtyard would echo with practical sounds rather than glorious ones. A blacksmith's hammer ringing against iron, stable boys brushing horses, brothers mending worn cloaks, servants hauling water from deep cisterns, a cook stirring a pot over an open fire. Somewhere inside the chapel, voices quietly reciting the Psalms. No hidden rituals, no mysterious ceremonies, just work. Endless work. Because castles, despite their romantic reputation, were essentially enormous maintenance projects. Walls cracked, roofs leaked, weapons rusted, animals became sick, grain spoiled. Someone always needed something repaired. The Templars quickly became masters not only of warfare, but also of organization. Their discipline extended far beyond the battlefield. Every horse was carefully accounted for, every weapon maintained, every donation recorded. Their records, though incomplete today, reveal an institution obsessed with efficiency. An individual knight might own nothing personally. The order, however, knew precisely how many saddles, shields, barrels, and sacks of grain belonged to each commandery. Perhaps this seems rather dull. It is. And it is also one reason they became so successful. Empires are rarely sustained by dramatic speeches. They survive because someone remembered to order enough oats before winter. Around this time, the Crusader states themselves settled into an uneasy rhythm. There were 4 principal Crusader territories stretching along the eastern Mediterranean: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Edessa. Together, they formed a fragile chain of Christian states surrounded by much larger Muslim powers. Picture a handful of islands floating in a vast sea. That was essentially their political situation. Communication between them remained difficult. Reinforcements from Europe required months to arrive. Sometimes they never arrived at all. Storms swallowed ships. Wars in Europe distracted kings. Money ran short. The Holy Land always seemed farther away than maps suggested. In this uncertain world, fortresses became everything. The Templars were entrusted with some of the most formidable castles ever constructed during the Middle Ages. These were not elegant royal palaces. They were machines built from stone. Every wall served a purpose. Every tower overlooked an approach. Every gate forced attackers into narrow killing zones. Among the greatest of these was Safed. Perched high above the hills of Galilee, it dominated surrounding valleys like a silent guardian. Massive walls climbed the mountainside, visible for miles. Within its defenses lived not only knights but priests, craftsmen, servants, laborers, physicians, blacksmiths, cooks, stable hands, and countless horses. A medieval fortress functioned almost like a small city. Water came from deep cisterns carved into solid rock. Food filled enormous storerooms. Chapels stood beside armories. The smell was a mixture of horses, smoke, leather, damp stone, fresh bread, sweat, and olive oil. Not exactly glamorous, but highly practical. One can almost hear dawn breaking over the battlements. The first rays of sunlight strike pale limestone walls. A trumpet sounds softly. Brothers gather for morning prayer. Their voices rise through cool air before dispersing across distant valleys. Soon afterward begins another ordinary day. Some patrol nearby roads. Others inspect defenses. Messengers arrive carrying news from Jerusalem. A merchant caravan requests an escort. The commander studies maps scratched upon wooden tables. Nothing seems extraordinary. Yet every peaceful day represents another quiet victory. Because beyond those walls, danger never entirely disappeared. Raiding parties moved constantly through the frontier. Small groups of horsemen could appear almost without warning. Sometimes Muslim forces sought supplies. Sometimes intelligence. Sometimes prisoners. Likewise, Crusader patrols conducted their own raids. Frontier warfare resembled a never-ending game of cautious moves and counter-moves. Large battles were comparatively rare. Small encounters happened almost weekly. The Templars earned respect precisely because they remained ready for either. When battle finally came, their methods differed noticeably from many feudal armies. Each brother understood his place. Heavy cavalry formed the striking force. Mounted on powerful horses, protected by chain mail and helmets, they carried long lances capable of delivering astonishing impact. Imagine hundreds of kilograms of armored horse and rider moving together at full speed. The earth itself seems to tremble. The sound builds gradually. Hooves striking dry ground. Harnesses clinking. Mail armor whispering against itself. Then suddenly the thunder arrives. To stand before such a charge required remarkable courage. Or perhaps remarkable desperation. Unfortunately, heavy cavalry also possessed weaknesses. Horses tired. Charges lost momentum. Broken ground disrupted formations. Archers proved dangerous. Heat exhausted both men and animals. The Templars understood these limitations. Contrary to legend, they were not reckless fanatics charging blindly toward glorious death. Their rules specifically instructed discipline. No knight was to attack independently. No pursuit without orders. No abandoning formation. Their strength lay in unity. A single knight could be defeated. A disciplined line became far more difficult to break. There was another remarkable aspect of Templar life often overlooked. Not every member carried a sword. Far from it. The order included priests responsible for spiritual care, sergeants who served as professional soldiers but came from lower social ranks, craftsmen, administrators, laborers, servants, interpreters, medical attendants, even accountants. Someone had to calculate harvests. Someone had to record donations. Someone had to negotiate purchases. The medieval world often imagined warfare as heroic individual combat. The Templars quietly demonstrated something more modern. Logistics wins wars. An army marches because thousands of ordinary tasks happen correctly. Without fodder, horses collapse. Without blacksmiths, armor breaks. Without grain, soldiers starve. Without records, supplies vanish. The Templars excelled at systems. And systems created power. Power, naturally, attracted generosity. Across Europe, donations accelerated. A widow in Normandy left vineyards to the order. A Spanish noble granted grazing lands. An English knight donated mills. An Italian merchant offered silver. Every gift strengthened their network. Soon, Templar commanderies dotted the landscape from Scotland to the Holy Land. Travelers moving across Europe frequently encountered these estates. Some resembled modest farms. Others grew into impressive complexes surrounded by walls, chapels, workshops, barns, and goosthouses. Every commandery connected to every other. Information flowed steadily. Money flowed even more steadily. Few people realized it then, but something revolutionary was quietly taking shape. Not another army, not another kingdom, something far more enduring. An international institution operating across political borders. Long before multinational corporations or modern banks, the Templars had begun creating one of medieval Europe's most sophisticated networks. A pilgrim in Paris might deposit money with the order before departing for Jerusalem. Instead of carrying dangerous quantities of silver across thousands of miles, he received a written document. Upon reaching the Holy Land, he could present it at another Templar house and withdraw funds there. Today the idea feels perfectly ordinary. Debit cards accomplish something similar every day. In the 12th century, however, it bordered on astonishing. No longer did wealthy pilgrims need to tempt every bandit between France and Palestine. The order had effectively developed a secure financial transfer system, not because they intended to invent banking, simply because solving practical problems often creates unexpected innovations. Of course, handling enormous sums of money required trust. The remarkable thing was that people trusted them. Their vows of poverty helped. Their religious reputation helped even more. Kings deposited treasure. Nobles stored valuables. Churches relied upon them. Merchants appreciated their reliability. Ironically, men forbidden from owning personal wealth gradually became custodians of immense collective wealth. History enjoys such paradoxes. The brothers themselves still lived under strict discipline. Yet the institutions surrounding them became astonishingly prosperous. No individual knight could grow rich. The order certainly did. Not through greed alone. Through donations, careful management, agriculture, trade, transportation, financial services, land. It was a remarkably diversified medieval economy. Some historians have even described the Templars as pioneers of international finance. While that may simplify a far more complex history, there is truth within it. They demonstrated that wealth could move securely without physically traveling alongside it. An idea whose consequences would echo through centuries. As evening settled over one of their commanderies, perhaps somewhere in Burgundy, candles flickered inside a stone hall. Brothers finished supper in silence, while scripture echoed softly from a lectern. Outside, horses shifted peacefully inside their stables. Beyond the walls stretched vineyards glowing silver beneath moonlight. Everything seemed calm, orderly, permanent. Perhaps that was the greatest illusion of all, for history never allows permanence. Far to the south, beyond deserts and mountains, new leaders were rising within the Muslim world. Patient men, capable men, men who looked upon the divided Crusader states and saw opportunity rather than invincibility. Among them was one commander whose name would become inseparable from the fate of the Knights Templar. His enemies respected him. His followers admired him. History remembers him simply as Saladin. And with his rise, the comfortable certainty enjoyed by the Crusader kingdoms would begin to crumble, one careful step at a time. The desert has a curious way of making people feel very small. Stand alone upon one of the rocky ridges east of the Jordan River just before sunrise. The air is cool enough that your breath almost seems visible. The horizon glows faintly with ribbons of pale orange and violet. Somewhere in the distance, a camel bell rings softly. A shepherd calls to his flock. Beyond the scattered acacia trees stretches a landscape that appears almost timeless. It is easy to imagine that nothing ever changes here. History would disagree. Beneath this quiet sky, kingdoms rose and disappeared. Armies marched until their footprints vanished beneath the next sandstorm. Victorious generals became forgotten names carved into weathered stones. The Templars, despite their growing confidence, were about to discover that even the strongest fortress cannot stop history itself. For several decades after the First Crusade, the Muslim world remained politically divided. Different rulers competed with one another. Cities argued. Dynasties fought over territory. Personal rivalries often proved stronger than any shared religious purpose. For the Crusader states, this division was almost as valuable as any castle wall. An enemy occupied with fighting himself rarely has much energy left for conquering someone else. The Templars understood this, even if they did not always say it aloud. Many of their victories depended not upon overwhelming strength, but upon surviving while their opponents remained divided. It was an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the greatest ally is your enemy's inability to cooperate. Unfortunately for the Crusader kingdoms, such good fortune rarely lasts forever. During the middle decades of the 12th century, a remarkable political transformation began unfolding across the Islamic world. Patiently, gradually, almost invisibly at first. A Turkish commander named Zengi laid some of the foundations by uniting territories in Syria and northern Mesopotamia. After his death, his son Nur ad-Din continued that work with even greater determination. Unlike many earlier rulers, Nur ad-Din looked beyond local rivalries. He dreamed of something larger. Unity. Not perfect unity. History almost never grants that luxury, but enough cooperation to challenge the Crusader states seriously. It was under Nur ad-Din that a young Kurdish officer first began attracting attention. His name was Yusuf ibn Ayyub. Most people would remember him by another name, Saladin. If the medieval world had possessed leadership seminars, Saladin would probably have become their favorite case study. He was not the loudest commander, nor the most flamboyant. He rarely rushed into reckless decisions. Instead, he cultivated patience, diplomacy, careful planning. He built alliances as skillfully as other generals built siege engines. And perhaps most importantly, he understood that victories won through politics often cost far fewer lives than victories won through battle. That does not mean he disliked military campaigns. Far from it. He simply recognized that war was expensive. Cities destroyed by conquest paid no taxes. Dead farmers harvested no grain. Burned villages supported no armies. Conquest, to Saladin, was valuable only if something worthwhile remained afterward. This practical outlook earned him respect from allies and enemies alike. Even many Christian chroniclers, despite fighting against him, described Saladin with reluctant admiration. Not because he was perfect. No ruler ever is. But because he possessed qualities rarely found together. Courage. Discipline. Mercy on occasion. Ruthlessness when necessary. An unfortunate combination if you happen to oppose him. Meanwhile, the Templars continued expanding their responsibilities. Their castles multiplied. Their revenues increased. Their reputation became legendary across Europe. Young noblemen eagerly sought admission into the order. Kings consulted their leaders. Popes granted them extraordinary privileges. Perhaps the most astonishing privilege of all was their independence. The Templars answered directly to the Pope, not to local bishops, not to kings, not even to the rulers whose lands they occupied. This arrangement made practical sense. It protected the order from local political interference. It also made them unusually powerful. Imagine operating thousands of estates across Europe while remaining largely exempt from local taxation and directly accountable only to the highest religious authority in Western Christendom. Such freedom was almost unimaginable. Naturally, it also made some people quietly jealous. Not yet. That would come later. For now, admiration outweighed resentment. Back in the Holy Land, however, everyday life remained far less glamorous than Europe's growing fascination suggested. Summer heat settled over the countryside like an enormous, invisible blanket. By midday, armor became almost unbearable. Chainmail absorbed the sun's warmth until touching it with bare fingers felt unpleasant. Helmets trapped hot air around the face. Sweat-soaked padded garments worn beneath iron rings. Horses tired quickly. Water became precious. Modern audiences often picture medieval battles occurring beneath dramatic storm clouds. In reality, many soldiers simply tried not to faint from exhaustion. A Templar patrol crossing the Judean hills during July faced challenges no less demanding than enemy swords. Dust coated everything: eyes, clothing, food. Even drinking water carried a faint taste of earth. Leather cracked beneath relentless sunlight. Metal grew too hot to handle comfortably. By evening, every brother looked several years older than he had that morning. Yet discipline never relaxed. Prayer remained constant. Equipment inspections continued. Horses received care before the men themselves rested. The rule governed daily existence regardless of weather. There is something strangely comforting about routine during uncertain times. Perhaps that explains why military organizations throughout history placed such emphasis upon discipline. Routine creates stability when the surrounding world refuses to cooperate. Still, even the most disciplined order occasionally encountered personalities impossible to control. One such personality was Reynold of Chatillon. Reynold was not a Templar. He was a Crusader noble whose appetite for risk seemed almost limitless. If medieval history awarded prizes for questionable decision-making, Reynold would have accumulated an impressive collection. He possessed genuine courage. Unfortunately, courage without restraint often resembles recklessness wearing better clothing. Despite treaties intended to preserve uneasy peace between Christian and Muslim rulers, Reynold repeatedly attacked caravans traveling through his territory. Not military convoys, commercial caravans, pilgrims, merchants, sometimes even groups explicitly protected by agreements. These raids enriched him. They also infuriated Saladin. Imagine spending years patiently constructing diplomatic relationships only to watch one ambitious noble repeatedly undermine everything because he could not resist attacking passing caravans. Once suspect, Saladin developed frequent headaches. The Templars themselves occupied a complicated position. As a disciplined military order, they generally supported strategic planning over impulsive adventures. Yet they also existed to wage holy war. Balancing principle with practicality proved increasingly difficult, especially as political tensions intensified. Throughout the 1180s, the fragile balance sustaining the Crusader kingdom began unraveling. Small confrontations multiplied, alliances weakened, trust evaporated. Everyone sensed something approaching. No one could prevent it. Then came the year 1187, one of the most consequential years in medieval history. The campaign began with remarkable speed. Saladin gathered an enormous army drawn from territories united under his leadership. His forces moved deliberately toward the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Crusaders responded by assembling nearly every available fighting man. Templars marched alongside Hospitallers, feudal knights, infantry, and local troops. The stakes could hardly have been higher. If this army failed, few reserves remained. The opposing forces finally converged near a place called Hattin, two volcanic hills overlooking dry countryside west of the Sea of Galilee. Today the location appears peaceful. Grasses wave gently across the slopes. Birds circle overhead. Visitors often remark upon the beauty. History has an unsettling habit of choosing beautiful places for terrible events. The Crusader army faced immediate difficulties. Water, or rather, the alarming lack of it. Saladin skillfully maneuvered his opponents away from reliable springs. July heat intensified relentlessly. Men suffered. Horses suffered even more. Thirst became another enemy. Then smoke appeared. Muslim forces deliberately set fire to dry grass. Wind carried thick smoke toward exhausted Crusader lines. Imagine standing in heavy armor beneath blazing summer sun. Your throat already burns with thirst. Now smoke fills the air. Eyes sting. Breathing becomes difficult. Visibility fades. Confusion spreads. Sometimes battles are won long before swords actually meet. The Battle of Hattin erupted on July 4th, 1187. For the Templars, it became catastrophe. They fought with characteristic determination. Repeated charges attempted to break surrounding forces. Again and again they attacked. Again and again they found themselves overwhelmed. Discipline alone could not overcome exhaustion, thirst, superior numbers, and brilliant strategy. One by one, formations collapsed. The Crusader army disintegrated. Thousands died. Thousands more surrendered. Among the prisoners were many Templars and Hospitallers. Saladin made a notable distinction. Ordinary soldiers often received opportunities for ransom. Members of the military orders largely did not. He viewed them as permanent professional warriors who would inevitably return to combat if released. Many were executed. A grim reminder that respect between enemies did not eliminate brutality. War seldom grants such comforts. The defeat shattered the military strength of the Kingdom of Jerusalem almost overnight. Entire generations of experienced knights disappeared. Relics considered sacred were captured. Leadership collapsed. Roads that Templars had protected for decades suddenly lay open. The consequences spread rapidly. City after city surrendered. Fortresses negotiated terms. Resistance weakened. Only a few strongholds held out. Then, several months later, came the event that echoed across all of Europe. Jerusalem itself surrendered to Saladin. Unlike the bloody conquest of 1099, Saladin permitted many inhabitants to leave after paying ransom. Not everyone could afford it. Some became captives. Others were freed through charitable efforts. The city changed hands once more. Church bells fell silent. Islamic prayers again rose above Jerusalem. For Europe, the shock was immense. The Holy City, one at such enormous cost during the First Crusade, had been lost. For the Knights Templar, the loss struck even deeper. Jerusalem was not merely another city. It was the birthplace of their order. The place where Hugh of Paynes and 8 companions had first pledged themselves to protect pilgrims. The place where their legend had begun. Now, after nearly 70 years, it was gone. And standing upon the smoking ruins of Hattin, beside abandoned banners and broken lances scattered across the dry earth, few could have imagined that the Templars had entered not the end of their story, but merely the beginning of an even greater struggle, one that would eventually take them from the battlefields of the Holy Land to the royal courts of Europe, where swords would prove far less dangerous than kings. For a time, it must have felt as though the world itself had tilted, not collapsed, not yet, but shifted just enough that nothing seemed quite where it belonged anymore. The bells that had once welcomed pilgrims into Jerusalem no longer rang beneath Latin priests. The streets where Templar patrols had ridden for nearly 7 decades were now filled with different banners, different prayers, and different rulers. Dust settled over abandoned barracks. Wind drifted through courtyards that had once echoed with the footsteps of warrior monks. History has an odd habit of making enormous changes appear strangely quiet. Cities rarely announce that they have entered a new age. Life simply continues. Markets reopen. Children chase each other through alleyways. Bread is baked before dawn. Someone repairs a roof damaged during the siege. Someone else plants olives in a field just outside the walls. Empires rise and fall while ordinary people still have to cook dinner. For the surviving Templars, however, there was little time for reflection. They had lost Jerusalem, but they had not lost the war. Not yet. The order withdrew to the remaining Crusader strongholds scattered along the Mediterranean coast. Acre, Tyre, Tortosa, Utlit. These ports became lifelines connecting the Holy Land with Europe. Ships arrived carrying reinforcements, grain, horses, weapons, pilgrims, merchants, priests, and occasionally nobles eager to prove themselves beneath the eastern sun. The sea became the Crusader kingdom's greatest ally. As long as Christian fleets controlled the Mediterranean routes, supplies continued arriving. Lose the sea, and everything else would eventually follow. The Templars understood this immediately. Their castles increasingly faced the coastline rather than Jerusalem. Their future depended upon ports. And perhaps nowhere demonstrated this better than the great fortress of Utlit. Known to the Templars as Chateau Pellerin, the Pilgrim's Castle, it rose directly beside the sea approximately 15 miles south of Acre. Even today, the ruins inspire awe. Imagine it in its prime. Immense limestone walls gleaming beneath bright Mediterranean sunlight. Massive towers overlooking crashing waves. A harbor protected by stone defenses. Warehouses overflowing with grain. Blacksmiths repairing armor. Ships anchored offshore. The smell of salt mixed with wood smoke and fresh bread. It was less a castle than an entire military city. If Jerusalem represented the spiritual birthplace of the Templars, Utlit represented their determination to survive. Here, they adapted. The loss of the Holy City forced them to rethink everything. No longer could they rely upon fixed frontiers stretching across inland Palestine. Now they defended isolated coastal enclaves connected primarily by sea. Their mission evolved from guarding pilgrimage roads to preserving the very existence of the Crusader presence. It was a difficult transition. Some brothers undoubtedly wondered whether God had abandoned their cause. Such questions rarely appear in official documents. Organizations seldom record moments of doubt. Individuals certainly experience them. Picture an aging Templar standing atop Itlit's walls one calm evening around the year 1195. The Mediterranean glows orange beneath the setting sun. Fishing boats drift toward harbor. Seabirds circle overhead. Far inland, beyond rolling hills, lies Jerusalem. Invisible, unreachable. The city where he perhaps took his vows as a young man, now occupied by another ruler. He has spent decades believing that defending the Holy Land was God's calling. Now the Holy City is gone. One wonders what prayers sound like during moments such as these. History rarely preserves them. Meanwhile, Europe responded to Jerusalem's fall with extraordinary determination. The news had spread with astonishing speed. Months after Hattin, churches across France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire echoed with sermons calling for another crusade. Among those who answered were some of the most powerful rulers in Europe. Richard I of England, Philip II of France, Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. 3 kings, 3 enormous armies, 3 very different personalities. If medieval diplomacy occasionally resembled a family dinner where everyone secretly disliked one another, the Third Crusade did little to improve matters. Frederick Barbarossa, already one of Europe's greatest rulers, marched overland with an impressive army. Sadly, he never reached the Holy Land. While crossing a river in Anatolia in 1190, the emperor drowned. Even today, historians debate exactly how it happened. Perhaps his horse stumbled. Perhaps the current proved stronger than expected. However it occurred, one of medieval Europe's most formidable leaders died not in glorious battle, but in an unfortunate accident. History possesses an unexpectedly dark sense of irony. His army largely dispersed afterward. Philip II eventually reached the eastern Mediterranean. So did Richard. Richard Plantagenet, better known as Richard the Lionheart, would become one of the most celebrated crusading kings in history. Tall, energetic, remarkably brave, an exceptional battlefield commander. Also stubborn, impatient, expensive, and occasionally exhausting for those required to negotiate with him. He and Philip cooperated, in the technical sense of the word, which is to say they argued rather frequently. Eventually Philip returned to France, leaving Richard to continue the campaign. The Templars fought beside Richard throughout much of the Third Crusade. They admired his military ability. Richard respected their discipline. At times he even relied upon their advice. Unlike many nobles who sought individual glory, the Templars generally thought strategically. Richard appreciated competent professionals. There was plenty of work requiring competence. The city of Acre became the focal point. The siege lasted nearly 2 years. Imagine the scene. Thousands upon thousands of tents stretching across the coastline. Ships crowding the harbor. Siege engines creaking endlessly. The smell of mud after winter rains. Disease spreading through crowded camps. Priests conducting funerals almost daily. Merchants somehow finding opportunities to sell wine to exhausted soldiers. Where armies gather, commerce inevitably follows. Because of course it does. Life inside a medieval siege rarely resembled heroic paintings. It was mostly waiting. Waiting while engineers built siege towers. Waiting for supplies. Waiting for negotiations. Waiting for disease to pass. Waiting for walls to weaken. Then suddenly, terrifying violence. Hours of desperate fighting. Followed by more waiting. The Templars became indispensable during such operations. Their organizational skills kept armies functioning. Their engineers assisted with fortifications. Their disciplined cavalry remained ready whenever opportunities appeared. Richard eventually captured Acre in 1191. It was a significant victory, yet Jerusalem remained beyond reach. Despite brilliant tactical successes, including Richard's famous victory at Arsuf, retaking the Holy City proved impossible. The campaign gradually shifted toward negotiation. Richard and Saladin, though never meeting face-to-face according to most historical accounts, developed a curious mutual respect. Messages passed between them. Gifts were exchanged. Each recognized the other's abilities. Neither fully trusted the other. That is generally how diplomacy works. Eventually, a treaty allowed Christian pilgrims access to Jerusalem without returning the city itself. It was an imperfect compromise. Most compromises are. Richard sailed home. Saladin returned to governing his territories. The Templars remained. Still defending. Still rebuilding. Still hoping. Years turned into decades. The Crusader states survived. Barely. Each generation seemed to require another crusade from Europe simply to maintain what remained. Fresh armies arrived. Some achieved victories. Others accomplished remarkably little beyond exhausting everyone involved. The Templars adapted again and again. New castles, new commanders, new recruits from Europe. The Brotherhood endured. And while warfare continued in the East, something extraordinary unfolded far away across Europe. The Order's financial network expanded beyond anything Hugh of Paynes could possibly have imagined. Templar commanderies multiplied across England, France, Portugal, Aragon, Castile, Germany, Italy, and beyond. They managed farms, vineyards, sheep flocks, water mills, forests, ports, workshops. Every estate generated income. Every commandery connected to a wider network. Messages traveled with surprising efficiency. Funds moved securely between kingdoms. Kings themselves increasingly borrowed money from the Order. Imagine the remarkable transformation. A brother who personally owned nothing might spend his afternoon overseeing financial transactions worth fortunes. Not for himself, for the institution. The paradox became almost poetic. They had sworn poverty. The Order became one of Europe's wealthiest organizations. Not because individual knights lived lavishly. Most continued sleeping in simple quarters, eating modest meals, and following strict routines. The wealth belonged collectively to the Brotherhood. Yet to outsiders, distinctions like that often mattered very little. People rarely notice whether treasure belongs to an individual or an institution. They simply notice treasure. And where great wealth accumulates, envy quietly follows. Not immediately. Like ivy climbing an old stone wall, it grows slowly enough that few recognize it until everything is covered. Some nobles began whispering. How much land did the Templars really need? Why should they answer only to the Pope? Why were they exempt from certain taxes? How much gold filled their vaults? Most of these questions remained private. For now, because the Templars still possessed something stronger than suspicion. They possessed usefulness. As long as they defended the Holy Land and managed Europe's finances efficiently, kings tolerated their privileges, perhaps even appreciated them. History, however, has another habit. The moment an institution becomes less useful than it is wealthy, its troubles often begin. The Templars could not yet see the storm gathering on the horizon. They still believed their greatest challenges would come from armies crossing deserts, from sieges, from battles, from rival commanders beneath distant eastern skies. Instead, the danger was quietly growing in Europe itself. Inside magnificent royal palaces, behind polished wooden doors, across tables covered not with maps of battlefields, but with unpaid debts. And debts, history repeatedly reminds us, have ended almost as many great powers as swords ever have. Winter settled differently across Europe than it did in the Holy Land. In Jerusalem, the rains came gently, washing dust from ancient stones and filling cisterns hidden beneath fortresses. The air cooled. Hills briefly turned green before surrendering once more to the long Mediterranean summer. In northern France, winter felt altogether more determined. Cold rain soaked cloaks until they seemed twice their proper weight. Smoke drifted from hundreds of village chimneys beneath endless gray skies. Bare oak branches scratched against monastery walls while monks hurried between buildings carrying armfuls of firewood. Frost glittered upon vineyards waiting patiently for spring. It was here, far from the deserts of Palestine, that the Knights Templar had become something Hugh of Paynes could never have imagined. They were no longer simply guardians of pilgrims. They were landlords, administrators, diplomats, shipowners, builders, judges on occasion, and perhaps most surprisingly, bankers. The word itself would have sounded unfamiliar to many medieval people. Modern banks are filled with computers, vaults, electronic transfers, and people politely asking whether you would like to hear about a savings account. A Templar commandery looked rather different. Picture a large stone complex surrounded by cultivated fields. Barns stand beside workshops. A small chapel anchors the center. Nearby are stables filled with powerful horses. Servants unload wagons carrying sacks of grain. Merchants arrive with contracts tucked inside leather satchels. A nobleman rides through the gate accompanied by armed retainers. He is not here to pray. Not primarily. He has come because he trusts the Templars. Perhaps he wishes to deposit silver before leaving on pilgrimage. Perhaps he needs a loan. Perhaps he wants valuable documents stored safely behind thick stone walls. The brothers receive him politely. Everything is carefully recorded. Wax seals are pressed on a parchment. Witnesses observe transactions. Inventories are updated with remarkable precision. It is not glamorous, but it is dependable. Dependability is astonishingly valuable, especially in an age when political fortunes could change before breakfast. Consider a wealthy merchant preparing to travel from Paris to Acre. Carrying thousands of silver coins across Europe would be unwise. Bandits appreciated such generosity. Instead, he deposits the money with the Templars in France. They issue documentation identifying the amount. Months later, after crossing mountains, sailing seas, surviving storms, avoiding pirates, negotiating customs officials, and probably developing an enduring dislike for medieval roads, he reaches the Holy Land. There, another Templar house verifies the documents. Funds are released. No wagon full of silver ever needed to make the journey. Simple, brilliant, revolutionary. The order did not invent every aspect of medieval finance. Merchants, Jewish communities, Italian trading cities, and Islamic financial systems had already developed sophisticated methods of commerce. History rarely grants inventions to a single individual or organization. Rather, the Templars perfected a system uniquely suited to their international network. Trust became their greatest currency. And trust, unlike gold, grows slowly. Across Europe, commanderies multiplied. London, Paris, Aragon, Portugal, Sicily, Flanders. Every new estate strengthened the network. Some specialized in agriculture. Others trained recruits. Some managed regional finances. Others supplied horses for the Holy Land. The organization resembled a living organism. Each part performed different functions. Together, they created remarkable resilience. If drought struck one region, another supplied grain. If war disrupted one route, messages traveled another. Few medieval institutions operated with such coordination. It is easy to forget how astonishing this was. Europe remained politically fragmented. Kings argued constantly. Borders shifted. Coins differed from one territory to another. Languages changed every few hundred miles. Yet the Templars quietly operated across all of them. A brother arriving from England could expect familiar routines in Portugal. Prayer at the appointed hours. Similar rules. Shared discipline. The same white cloak folded neatly inside his quarters. In many ways, the order represented one of medieval Europe's first truly international organizations. Its loyalty lay not with any kingdom, but with itself, and with the Pope. That independence brought advantages. It also planted seeds of future trouble. Power rarely exists without attracting suspicion. Imagine yourself as a medieval king. You struggle to raise taxes. Local nobles ignore your instructions whenever convenient. Merchants negotiate relentlessly. Then you look across your realm and notice an organization owning enormous estates, collecting revenues efficiently, maintaining armed men, and answering directly to someone hundreds of miles away in Rome. Would that make you slightly uncomfortable? Probably. Most rulers tolerated the arrangement because the Templars remained useful. Very useful. They fought crusades, protected trade, handled finances, maintained fortresses. As long as those services continued, privileges seemed acceptable. Still, quiet questions lingered. How much land did they truly own? How much wealth rested inside their vaults? No one seemed entirely certain. Not even the Templars themselves could always calculate it quickly. Their holdings stretched from Scotland to Cyprus. Forests, windmills, villages, churches, bridges, ports, farms, vineyards, livestock by the tens of thousands. The image of two knights sharing one horse had become increasingly symbolic. There were now plenty of horses. Meanwhile, the Holy Land remained locked in exhausting cycles of war. Saladin died in 1193. Remarkably, he left surprisingly little personal wealth despite ruling vast territories. Much of his fortune had gone toward charity, military campaigns, and governance. His empire, like many before it, fragmented among heirs. Again, political divisions returned. Again, Crusader opportunities briefly improved. History often moves in circles. The Templars took advantage where possible. Castles were repaired. Frontiers adjusted. Pilgrim routes reopened. Yet something fundamental had changed after Hattin. Confidence. Before 1187, many Europeans believed the Crusader kingdoms represented permanent additions to Christendom. Afterward, permanence seemed like wishful thinking. Every victory now felt temporary. Every fortress seemed one siege away from isolation. Every generation required fresh reinforcements from Europe. Those reinforcements became increasingly difficult to obtain. Crusading enthusiasm remained strong. But Europe itself was changing. Kings fought neighboring kingdoms. Dynastic disputes demanded attention. Economic priorities shifted. New political realities emerged. The Holy Land no longer occupied quite the same place within every ruler's imagination. Some still answered the Pope's call enthusiastically. Others sent money instead of soldiers. A few offered polite excuses. Distance has a remarkable ability to reduce urgency. Jerusalem felt emotionally close. Geographically, it remained very far away. The Templars carried on regardless. Duty seldom waits for ideal circumstances. Young recruits continued arriving. Many were second or third sons of noble families. Without inheriting family estates, they sought purpose elsewhere. Joining the order offered something remarkable: structure, brotherhood, honor, a clear mission. One can imagine such a recruit entering a commandery in Burgundy around the year 1210. He is perhaps 19. His horse still carries dust from several weeks of travel. He has dreamed of becoming a Templar since childhood. The reality surprises him. He expected constant adventure. Instead, his first week involves cleaning stables, learning prayers, repairing harnesses, studying regulations, scrubbing cooking pots. Humility arrives quickly. Only later does military training begin. Sword practice. The order sought disciplined brothers, not reckless heroes. Heroics often look impressive until someone has to explain unnecessary casualties. Eventually, if judged worthy, he sails east. The voyage alone tests patience. Weeks aboard crowded ships. Storms. Seasickness. Stale water. Spoiled food. Everyone smells increasingly unfortunate. Medieval travel possessed remarkably little romance once one actually attempted it. At last, Acre appears upon the horizon. Its harbor buzzes with activity. Italian merchant vessels unload cargo. Pilgrims crowd narrow streets. Languages from across Europe mingle with Arabic, Greek, Armenian, and countless local dialects. The city feels alive. Complicated. Chaotic. Nothing like the quiet villages of France. For many brothers, Acre becomes their new home. It is the largest remaining Crusader city. The unofficial capital after Jerusalem's loss. Bustling markets overflow with spices from the east. Silks, glassware, ivory, sugar, perfumes, copper, wheat. Every scent imaginable drifts through crowded streets. Commerce and crusade exist side by side. Perhaps they always had. War, after all, rarely eliminates trade. Instead, it simply changes who profits. Within Acre, the Templars maintain an enormous fortified headquarters overlooking the harbor. Visitors describe impressive walls and towers dominating the waterfront. The complex resembles a city within a city. Warehouses store supplies. Chapels host constant prayers. Barracks house hundreds of brothers. Treasuries protect documents and valuables. Everything functions with practiced efficiency. From these headquarters, orders travel across Europe. Money flows in. Resources flow out. The machine continues operating. Yet beyond Acre's walls, powerful forces gather once more. Not under Saladin now, under new rulers. New dynasties. New ambitions. The Mamluks, elite military rulers rising from former slave soldiers, are transforming Egypt into one of the most formidable powers in the region. Unlike earlier opponents, they possess extraordinary military organization and relentless determination. They intend not merely to weaken the Crusader states. They intend to remove them completely. The Templars have survived hardship before. They have rebuilt after disaster. They have adapted repeatedly. But the age that lies ahead will demand more than courage. It will demand survival against an enemy every bit as disciplined as themselves. And somewhere, quietly waiting beyond even that future, another enemy is taking shape. Not an army, not a sultan, not a crusade. A king sitting comfortably upon a throne in France. A king who owes enormous debts, and who has begun wondering whether eliminating his creditors might prove financially convenient. History, unfortunately for the Templars, has always rewarded dangerous ideas when they belong to powerful men. The sea has always been an honest storyteller. Stand upon the walls of Acre in the final years of the 13th century and watch the Mediterranean at dawn. The water glows silver beneath the first light. Fishing boats drift lazily beyond the harbor. Merchant ships from Venice and Genoa raise their sails, their crews shouting in half a dozen languages. Gulls circle overhead with the confidence of creatures who have witnessed empires come and go so many times that another one hardly seems worth noticing. The waves never hurry. Kings do. Perhaps that is why the sea usually outlasts them. For the Templars, Acre had become more than a city. It was their beating heart. Their headquarters overlooked the harbor like a stone guardian, its massive walls rising directly from the water. Visitors approaching by ship often saw the fortress long before they recognized the city itself. Within those walls lived not only knights, but an entire community. Armorers hammered glowing iron late into the evening. Scribes copied letters by candlelight. Stable masters inspected horses with almost parental concern. Priests celebrated Mass before sunrise. Servants carried water through narrow courtyards. Doctors treated wounds that never seemed to stop arriving. Somewhere, inevitably, a young recruit polished the same helmet for the third time because an older brother had quietly informed him that it still was not clean enough. Every generation invents new ways of teaching patience. Life inside the fortress followed familiar rhythms. Before dawn, bells summoned the brothers to prayer. They filed silently into the chapel, white mantles flowing softly in the dim light of oil lamps. Outside, the city still slept. Inside, voices rose together in ancient psalms. The words had been spoken for centuries. Kings changed. Languages evolved. Borders shifted. The prayers remained. There is something deeply comforting about rituals that survive longer than the people who practice them. After prayers came breakfast. Simple. Bread. Perhaps cheese. Sometimes fish. Wine diluted with water. No extravagant feasts. At least not for the brothers themselves. The rules still discouraged luxury. Then work began. Some brothers inspected the walls. Others trained in the courtyard. Messengers departed carrying sealed instructions toward distant castles. Accountants disappeared into storage rooms overflowing with ledgers. One imagines these accountants rarely receive enough appreciation in historical dramas. Yet without them, the entire organization would have collapsed remarkably quickly. Someone had to know how much grain remained. How many horses required replacement? Which vineyards produced poor harvests? Which estates still owed rent? History often celebrates the man carrying the sword while quietly forgetting the man carrying the notebook. The Templars wisely employed both. Outside Acre's walls, however, the political landscape had begun changing at an alarming pace. A new power had risen in Egypt. The Mamluks. Their story is extraordinary in its own right. Many began life as enslaved boys purchased from regions north of the Black Sea or the Caucasus. They were trained intensively as elite soldiers, educated in military discipline, horsemanship, languages, and religion. Then, in one of history's remarkable twists, these slave soldiers gradually seized political power themselves. By the middle of the 13th century, the Mamluks ruled Egypt. They possessed perhaps the finest cavalry in the Islamic world. Disciplined, professional, experienced. If the Templars represented one of medieval Christianity's greatest military institutions, the Mamluks represented something remarkably similar on the opposite side. Neither underestimated the other. In 1260, the Mamluks achieved a victory that echoed across continents. At the Battle of Ain Jalut, they defeated the Mongols. Now, Defeating the Mongols in the 13th century was rather like defeating a force of nature. For decades, Mongol armies had swept across Asia and Eastern Europe with astonishing success. Cities vanished before them. Kingdoms disappeared. Entire civilizations trembled. Many believed them unstoppable. The Mamluks proved otherwise. That victory transformed their reputation. It also freed them to concentrate more fully upon the remaining Crusader strongholds. The man leading much of this campaign was Sultan Baybars. If Saladin had often preferred careful diplomacy alongside warfare, Baybars embraced relentless military pressure. Energetic, ambitious, strategically gifted, he understood that isolated Crusader fortresses could be reduced one by one. There was no need for dramatic, decisive battles. Simply persistent pressure. One castle, then another, another. Like removing stones from a wall until eventually the entire structure collapses. The Templars resisted fiercely. Their castles had been designed precisely for such moments. Take Safed, for example. Its towering walls dominated northern Galilee. Deep cisterns stored water for long sieges. Granaries held food. Massive gates protected narrow entrances. The fortress appeared almost invincible. Almost. Baybars understood something every experienced commander eventually learns. No fortress is truly unconquerable. Every wall depends upon the people defending it. Every granary eventually empties. Every garrison grows tired. Every hope weakens if relief never arrives. Sieges became contests of endurance rather than courage. Courage rarely disappeared. Food did. Water sometimes did. Disease certainly arrived. Imagine living inside Safe during its final siege in 1266. Weeks pass, then months. The same walls, the same towers, the same anxious glances toward the horizon, hoping to see friendly banners. Nothing. Archers remain alert. Engineers repair damage every night. The smell of smoke never leaves the air. Bread becomes smaller. Water is measured more carefully. Some brothers pray longer than usual. Others sharpen swords they may never have another opportunity to use. Hope itself becomes another ration to conserve. Eventually, Safe surrendered. Not because its defenders lacked bravery. Because even bravery cannot manufacture food. Nor can it summon reinforcements that never arrive. Castle after castle followed similar patterns. Arsuf, Beaufort, Croix de Chevaliers, held by the Hospitallers rather than the Templars, yet equally symbolic. One by one, the Crusader frontier contracted. Each loss narrowed the remaining Christian foothold. The Templars continued adapting. They always had. Survivors regrouped. Fortifications strengthened elsewhere. New commanders appointed. The machine kept functioning. But the territory under its protection shrank steadily. Meanwhile, something fascinating was happening back in Europe. The image of the Templars had begun drifting away from reality. Most Europeans never visited the Holy Land. Their understanding came through stories. Pilgrims returned home describing magnificent castles. Preachers praised heroic sacrifices. Travelers spoke of mysterious Eastern adventures. Naturally, imagination filled every gap. Rumors flourished. Some whispered that the Templars possessed hidden treasures beyond counting. Others claimed they guarded relics of unimaginable holiness. A few insisted secret knowledge passed quietly between senior brothers. Human beings have always preferred mysterious explanations over ordinary ones. It is somehow more exciting to imagine hidden vaults beneath ancient temples than carefully organized grain storage. One can hardly blame them. The truth simply contains more bookkeeping. Still, those rumors accomplished something unexpected. They increased the order's prestige. Young noblemen admired them. Poets celebrated them. Kings borrowed from them. Even those who never met a Templar often felt they knew exactly what the order represented. That reputation became a kind of armor. Invisible. Powerful. Temporary. Because reputations depend upon public opinion. Public opinion changes remarkably quickly, especially when influential people decide it should. As the 1280s drew toward their close, Acre stood increasingly isolated. The city remained vibrant. Markets overflowed. Ships continued arriving. Pilgrims still came. Visitors could almost convince themselves everything would continue indefinitely. History often grants such comforting illusions shortly before ending an era. The final years possessed an almost dreamlike quality. Festivals continued. Merchants negotiated prices. Children played beside the harbor. Brothers attended prayers. Somewhere, couples married. Elsewhere, elderly men quietly died of natural causes. Life insisted upon remaining ordinary despite extraordinary danger. Then, in 1291, the storm finally arrived. An immense Mamluk army under Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil surrounded Acre. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers, siege engines, archers, engineers, supply trains stretching beyond sight. The greatest remaining Crusader city faced its ultimate test. Inside the walls, the Templars prepared exactly as they always had. Weapons inspected, stores counted, prayers offered, positions assigned. There would be no miraculous rescue from Europe. Everyone understood that. This time, they stood alone. The siege lasted weeks. Enormous stone projectiles crashed against walls that had resisted countless earlier attacks. Towers shook. Buildings collapsed. Smoke drifted constantly across the city. The harbor filled with desperate refugees attempting escape. Disease spread. Food dwindled. Still the defenders fought. Templars, Hospitallers, local soldiers, citizens, everyone capable of carrying a weapon. Street by street, wall by wall, house by house, the city's final days became chaos. When the outer defenses collapsed, fighting continued inside narrow streets. The Templars withdrew toward their fortress overlooking the sea. Even then they refused surrender. Their headquarters became the last major stronghold still resisting. Imagine those final hours. The once proud fortress now scarred by bombardment. Dust hanging thick in the air. Broken beams. Shattered stone. Exhausted brothers standing shoulder to shoulder in prayer before returning once more to the walls. Outside, enemy soldiers gather for another assault. Inside, everyone understands the ending. Few organizations in history have remained so faithful to their purpose at such terrible cost. Eventually, the fortress itself collapsed. Some accounts describe part of the structure falling into the sea during the fighting. Many defenders perished beneath the ruins. Others died with swords still in hand. A handful escaped by ship. A very small handful. With Acre's fall, nearly 2 centuries of Crusader rule in the Holy Land effectively came to an end. The Templars had lost not merely another city. They had lost the very land for which they had been created. Their original mission, protecting pilgrims in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, had become impossible. The surviving brothers sailed west, toward Cyprus, toward uncertainty, toward a future no one quite knew how to define. For the first time since Hugh of Paynes gathered his tiny band beside the Temple Mount, the Knights Templar no longer possessed a holy land to defend. And when an organization built for one purpose suddenly loses that purpose, the questions begin. What now? Unfortunately for the Templars, one man in France was already preparing an answer. His name was Philip IV, and history would remember him not as the man who fought the Templars, but as the king who destroyed them. The journey from Acre to Cyprus was not a voyage of triumph. There were no cheering crowds waiting on distant shores, no priests ringing bells to celebrate another miraculous escape. No songs composed about weary brothers watching the coastline of the Holy Land slowly disappear into the morning mist. Only silence. The Mediterranean, calm as ever, seemed almost indifferent. The sea had carried the first Crusaders east nearly 2 centuries earlier, filled with hope and certainty. Now it carried their descendants west. Older, fewer, far less certain. One can imagine a surviving Templar standing quietly at the stern of a ship as Acre fades beyond the horizon. Perhaps he had spent 20 years in the Holy Land. Perhaps 30. He had buried friends beneath its rocky soil. He had prayed in its chapels, patrolled its roads, defended its walls. Now everything lay behind him. There is a particular sadness reserved for leaving a place you believed would always be home. The brothers arriving in Cyprus brought more than armor and horses. They carried a question no one could yet answer. What is a military order without a battlefield? The Templars had not been created to govern peaceful estates in Europe, nor to become wealthy administrators. Their purpose had always been painfully clear. Protect pilgrims. Defend the Holy Land. Fight for Jerusalem. Now Jerusalem remained under Muslim rule. The Crusader states had vanished. Pilgrimages continued, but under entirely different political arrangements. The order suddenly found itself possessing extraordinary wealth, and no obvious mission worthy of it. History rarely treats such situations kindly. Organizations built for crisis often struggle during uncertainty. Kings began asking practical questions. If there was no Kingdom of Jerusalem, why did the Templars still require enormous military resources? Why maintain hundreds of commanderies? Why preserve tax exemptions? Why should thousands of acres across Europe continue supporting an army with nowhere meaningful to deploy? The brothers themselves certainly explored new possibilities. Some proposed launching another crusade. Others strengthened defenses on Cyprus. Plans emerged for naval expeditions. Committees met. Letters crossed Europe. Ideas multiplied. Results did not. Europe had changed. The appetite for massive crusades had weakened. People still spoke passionately about Jerusalem. Finding the money and political unity necessary to recover it proved considerably more difficult, especially because Europe had developed plenty of problems closer to home. Kings argued with neighboring kingdoms. Popes argued with emperors. Nobles argued with everyone. The medieval world had not become less complicated. If anything, it had become more so. And standing at the center of this increasingly tangled web was one particularly determined monarch, Philip IV of France. History has given him several names. Philip the Fair, because of his appearance. Philip the Iron King, because of his personality. The second nickname probably reveals more. He was intelligent, reserved, methodical, not especially charming. He viewed government as a machine that should function efficiently. If something, or someone, interfered with that machine, Philip preferred removing the obstacle rather than negotiating endlessly around it. In fairness, medieval kings rarely enjoyed easy jobs. France was becoming one of Europe's most powerful kingdoms. Power, unfortunately, required money. Large armies required money. Administrators required money. Wars required astonishing quantities of money. Coin, quite inconveniently, never seemed plentiful enough. Philip constantly searched for new revenue. Sometimes he debased the currency by reducing the precious metal content of coins. This pleased almost no one. Sometimes he imposed new taxes. These proved equally unpopular. Occasionally he borrowed enormous sums. Those loans eventually demanded repayment. Among his creditors stood one particularly wealthy institution, the Knights Templar. It is tempting to imagine Philip sitting alone late one evening inside the Louvre Palace in Paris. Not the vast museum we know today, but the medieval royal fortress that occupied the same site. Candles flicker across parchment documents. Financial records lie open before him. Columns of figures, lists of debts, military expenses, tax revenues. Somewhere within those ledgers appears another uncomfortable reminder of money owed to the Templars. Kings generally dislike owing money, especially to organizations operating beyond their direct control. The Templars enjoyed privileges unlike almost anyone else in Europe. They answered only to the Pope. Their estates were largely exempt from royal interference. They possessed fortified properties, independent courts, international connections, financial influence. None of this automatically made them enemies of the French crown. But from Philip's perspective, it certainly made them inconvenient. Meanwhile, another conflict unfolded that would shape everything that followed. Philip quarreled bitterly with Pope Boniface VIII over taxation and royal authority. Neither man particularly enjoyed surrendering power. Their relationship deteriorated spectacularly. Eventually, agents loyal to Philip even seized the elderly pope in Italy during the infamous incident at Anagni in 1303. Although Boniface was released shortly afterward, he died within weeks. The papacy itself entered a period of profound instability. Soon afterward, a French pope, Clement V, was elected. Officially, he remained independent. Unofficially, Philip possessed considerable influence. The balance of power had shifted. The Templars probably noticed these political developments. Whether they appreciated their significance remains uncertain. They had survived difficult kings before. Difficult popes too. Politics changed constantly. The order endured. Or so it seemed. Back in Paris, the Templar headquarters stood as one of the city's most impressive complexes. Known simply as the Temple, it included massive walls, towers, workshops, chapels, gardens, and secure vaults. Travelers entering Paris often remarked upon its size. Merchants trusted its treasury. Royal officials occasionally stored valuables there. Even members of the French royal family sometimes relied upon its financial services. The irony would later become almost unbearable. The king who planned their destruction had once depended upon them. Throughout Europe, ordinary brothers remained blissfully unaware of what was unfolding. Life continued as always. Morning prayers, horse care, harvest supervision, accounting, hospitality for travelers, military training. Some younger recruits had never even seen the Holy Land. They knew Jerusalem only through stories told by older brothers whose hair had begun turning gray. For them, the order itself was home. Its traditions, its prayers, its discipline, its familiar white mantle. None suspected that within a few short years, wearing that cloak would become extraordinarily dangerous. Rumors, however, have curious beginnings. Small whispers circulated. The Templars had become too wealthy, too secretive, too independent. People noticed that initiation ceremonies remained private, as they did for many medieval religious orders. Yet secrecy invites imagination. Those excluded from closed doors inevitably invent explanations. Some whispered that strange rituals occurred during admission. Others hinted at hidden teachings. Still others claimed unimaginable treasures remained concealed inside Templar vaults. Evidence rarely accompanied these stories. Evidence is frequently unnecessary for successful rumors, especially when powerful individuals find those rumors useful. Philip's advisors quietly gathered information. Former members were questioned. Critics listened carefully. Old grievances rediscovered. Tiny fragments of truth mixed effortlessly with wild invention. History repeatedly demonstrates how easily accusations grow when politics demands them. One dissatisfied former brother says something bitter. Another recalls an unusual ceremony without understanding its symbolism. A third repeats gossip heard years earlier. Eventually, someone writes everything down. Soon speculation begins resembling fact. The process feels surprisingly modern. By 1307, preparations had advanced considerably. Letters were drafted. Royal officials received sealed instructions. Messengers prepared for simultaneous action across France. Secrecy became essential. If the Templars received warning, they might flee, destroy records, move treasure, organize resistance. Philip intended none of those possibilities. He planned something breathtaking in its scale. Every Templar in France would be arrested. On the same day, at the same hour, without warning. The date chosen carried no obvious significance at the time. Friday, October 13th, 1307. Centuries later, countless legends would attach themselves to that particular Friday the 13th. Most are almost certainly fictional. Human beings enjoy connecting mysterious dates to dramatic events. Reality requires no embellishment. The truth was astonishing enough. As autumn leaves drifted gently across French roads, Templar brothers retired to bed on the evening of October 12th, believing tomorrow would resemble yesterday. Prayers before dawn, breakfast, routine duties, perhaps supervising vineyards, perhaps reviewing accounts, perhaps training horses. Ordinary concerns. None imagined royal soldiers were already riding through darkness carrying sealed orders. Orders instructing local officials not merely to investigate, but to seize every member of the order. Everything was ready. The trap had been carefully constructed. The king had chosen his moment with remarkable precision. And before another sunrise had fully illuminated the rooftops of Paris, one of the most powerful organizations in medieval Europe would awaken to discover that its greatest enemy had never been waiting beyond the walls of Jerusalem. He had been sitting upon the throne of France all along. Before dawn on Friday, October 13th, 1307, France felt perfectly ordinary. A baker in Paris rose while the streets were still dark, rubbing flour from sleepy eyes before lighting the first fire of the morning. Somewhere in Burgundy, farmers stirred beneath wool blankets, already dreading another day of autumn rain. Monks gathered quietly for matins, their voices echoing through stone cloisters as candles flickered against ancient walls. Nothing in the air warned that history was about to turn. The sky gave no sign. The wind remained indifferent. Birds sang exactly as they had the morning before. Perhaps history's greatest changes are often the quietest at first. Across the kingdom, royal officials waited. Each carried sealed instructions bearing the king's authority. Most had received those orders only days earlier with strict instructions not to open them until a specified time. The secrecy was extraordinary. Even many of Philip's own advisors knew only fragments of the plan. The king understood one simple fact. The Templars possessed disciplined men, fortified buildings, and communication networks stretching across Europe. If even one commandery received advance warning, the entire operation might fail. So the letters remained sealed. Hundreds of them. Waiting. Imagine being one of those royal bailiffs standing outside a Templar commandery just before sunrise. The parchment in your hand still feels slightly damp from the morning mist. Around you gather soldiers, shifting nervously beneath mail armor. Some have borrowed ladders. Others carry axes. None truly know what they are about to discover. They have heard rumors. Heretics. Secret rituals. Terrible blasphemies. Or perhaps nothing at all. Orders are orders. The church bells begin ringing. Almost simultaneously, throughout France, seals are broken. The king's commands are finally read aloud. Arrest every Templar. Confiscate their property. Seize their records. Allow no escape. It was one of the most carefully coordinated police operations of the Middle Ages. At the temple in Paris, the brothers had already begun their mourning. Perhaps some were attending prayers. Others might have been feeding horses. The Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay, happened to be in the city. His presence there seems almost unbearably unfortunate. Only the previous day he had attended the funeral of Catherine of Courtenay, a member of the French royal family. He had stood publicly alongside nobles and clergy. He apparently suspected nothing. Why would he? For decades the order had served kings faithfully. Now, before breakfast, royal soldiers surrounded the temple. Doors opened. Commands shouted. Brothers stared in disbelief. Some probably assumed there had been a mistake. Surely the king wished to consult them. Surely some misunderstanding required clarification. Instead, they found themselves placed under arrest. Not merely questioned. Arrested. Across France the same astonishing scene repeated itself. At commanderies large and small, brothers emerged from dormitories to discover armed officials already waiting. Many surrendered peacefully. The rule emphasized obedience. Resistance appears to have been remarkably limited. Perhaps they simply could not comprehend what was happening. Perhaps they believed innocence would protect them. History offers many examples of innocent people placing excessive faith in legal processes. By evening, hundreds of Templars sat imprisoned. Their estates belonged to the crown. Their documents had been seized. Their horses inventoried. Their treasure, whatever could be found, placed under guard. The accusations announced against them shocked Europe. They were charged with heresy, idolatry, blasphemy, immoral conduct, secret ceremonies, renouncing Christ during initiation, spitting upon the cross, worshipping mysterious idols, sometimes described as a strange bearded head later called Baphomet. The list seemed almost unbelievable. Modern historians have spent generations examining these allegations. The overwhelming scholarly consensus is that the accusations were fabricated, exaggerated, extracted under torture, or distorted from misunderstood initiation rituals. That does not mean every witness deliberately lied. Memory is fragile. Fear reshapes recollection. Interrogators often ask leading questions. Prisoners eventually repeat what they believe their captors wish to hear, especially when pain enters the conversation. And pain entered very quickly. Medieval justice possessed methods we would now recognize as horrifying. The rack, strappado, burning, compression, sleep deprivation. The goal was confession. Truth became secondary. A confession carried enormous legal weight. If enough confessions accumulated, they appeared to validate one another. Never mind that they had often been obtained under circumstances guaranteeing almost any answer imaginable. A prisoner suspended painfully by bound wrists might confess to impossible things simply to make the agony stop. Human beings possess limits. That is not weakness. It is biology. One by one, brothers confessed. Some admitted spitting near a cross during initiation. Others spoke of symbolic rituals they barely understood. Some denied everything until torture began. Many later retracted their confessions whenever given the opportunity. Unfortunately, retracting a confession rarely proved as persuasive as obtaining one. Jacques de Molay himself eventually confessed to certain charges. Later he withdrew those admissions completely. The pattern repeated across France. Confess. Recant. Confess again. No modern courtroom would regard such testimony as reliable. Medieval courts often did. News spread astonishingly fast. Throughout Europe, people struggled to comprehend the allegations. Could the famous Templars truly have hidden monstrous secrets for nearly 2 centuries? Some believed the charges immediately. Others remained deeply skeptical. Several rulers outside France hesitated. After all, they had known the Templars for decades. Many had borrowed money from them, fought beside them, entrusted them with castles. The accusations simply did not fit the organization they remembered. Pope Clement V found himself trapped. He had never initiated the arrests. Philip had acted first. Yet the Pope could hardly ignore accusations of heresy against a religious order directly under papal authority. Initially, Clement protested the king's actions. Then pressure mounted. Enormous pressure. Philip insisted investigations continue. Eventually, papal inquiries expanded across Europe. Different kingdoms responded differently. England investigated reluctantly. Aragon showed considerable skepticism. Portugal handled matters in its own careful way. Germany produced mixed results. France remained the epicenter. There, Philip controlled events most effectively. Meanwhile, ordinary people watched in confusion. Imagine a farmer passing the local Templar estate. Only weeks earlier, brothers had supervised harvests as usual. Now royal officials occupy the buildings. The familiar white cloaks have disappeared. Doors remain locked. Neighbors whisper. Children invent frightening stories. No one quite knows what to believe. Rumor thrives best where certainty dies. Months turn into years. Prison cells replaced castles. Courtrooms replaced battlefields. Interrogations replaced cavalry charges. The order that had survived Hattin, Saladin, Baybars, and the fall of Acre now found itself helpless against paperwork, politics, and prison walls. It is one of history's cruelest ironies. For nearly 200 years, the Templars had prepared relentlessly for war. They had built fortresses capable of resisting siege engines. They had trained elite cavalry. They had crossed swords with some of the greatest commanders of the medieval world. None of those preparations helped inside a prison. A sword cannot cut through accusation. Armor offers little protection against testimony. Discipline becomes difficult when every day brings another interrogation. Some brothers died in captivity. Others disappeared into monasteries after release. Still others stubbornly maintained their innocence despite every pressure. The order itself continued existing officially for the moment. Its fate now rested not upon military victory, but upon decisions made inside church councils and royal palaces. Philip had achieved almost everything he wanted. The Templars' wealth lay under royal control. Their reputation had been shattered, their leadership imprisoned. Yet one final obstacle remained. As long as the order legally existed, there remained the possibility that it might one day recover. Philip intended to ensure that possibility never became reality. And so, while imprisoned brothers waited behind cold stone walls, church leaders prepared to gather for a council that would decide whether nearly 2 centuries of Templar history would end. Not with the clash of swords, but with the stroke of a pen. Prisons have their own peculiar rhythm. The outside world measures time by harvests, festivals, changing seasons, and the ringing of church bells. Inside a prison, time becomes something much smaller. A shaft of sunlight creeping slowly across a damp stone floor. The arrival of a guard carrying stale bread. The distant sound of rain striking the roof. The scraping of iron keys against heavy locks. Days blur together until even memory begins to lose its sharp edges. For Jacques de Molay, the final Grand Master of the Knights Templar, those years must have seemed endless. He had once commanded an organization stretching from Scotland to Cyprus. His letters had crossed continents. Kings had sought his advice. Now his world consisted largely of stone walls and uncertainty. One wonders what occupied his thoughts during those long nights. Did he remember Jerusalem? Did he think of Hugh of Paynes and the first brothers beneath the Temple Mount? Did he replay every decision that had brought the order to this moment? History rarely grants us access to such private reflections. It preserves official statements, not sleepless nights. Meanwhile, far beyond the prison walls, one of the most important church councils of the Middle Ages slowly took shape. The Council of Vienne. Not Vienna in modern Austria, but the small city of Vienne in southeastern France. It was here, beginning in 1311, that bishops, cardinals, abbots, and theologians gathered to discuss matters affecting all of Western Christendom. Officially, many issues stood on the agenda. Unofficially, everyone understood the central question: what should become of the Knights Templar? Imagine entering the Great Hall where the council met. The room smells faintly of wax candles, parchment, damp wool, and smoke from nearby fireplaces. Heavy robes rustle as bishops take their seats. Secretaries sharpen quills. Messengers arrive carrying fresh correspondence from distant kingdoms. Outside, ordinary townspeople continue their daily routines, almost unaware that decisions made inside this building may erase one of Europe's most famous institutions. The debates proved surprisingly complicated. Philip IV wanted decisive action. He preferred the order abolished entirely. Many churchmen hesitated. The evidence remained deeply troubling, not because it convincingly proved guilt, rather because it often failed to do so. Outside France, investigations had produced remarkably inconsistent results. Some kingdoms found almost no convincing evidence of heresy. Others obtained only reluctant confessions. Several rulers openly questioned the accusations. Portugal remained especially skeptical. So did parts of Spain. England's inquiries dragged on for years with little enthusiasm. If the Templars truly practiced widespread secret heresy for nearly 2 centuries, why had so few people noticed before 1307? It was an uncomfortable question, one that resisted easy answers. Pope Clement V found himself balancing on an impossibly narrow path. On one side stood the authority of the Church. On the other stood the immense political pressure exerted by Philip. The Pope understood that openly declaring the Templars innocent would provoke a direct confrontation with the French king. Declaring them guilty without convincing proof would undermine justice itself. Neither option appealed. Eventually, Clement chose a third path, a political solution rather than a judicial one. In March 1312, the papal bull Vox in Excelso formally suppressed the Order of the Temple. Notice something important. The document did not explicitly declare the Templars guilty of heresy. Instead, the Pope explained that the scandal surrounding the order had become so great that it could no longer continue. Legally speaking, this distinction mattered enormously. Practically speaking, the result remained the same. After nearly 200 years, the Knights Templar officially ceased to exist. Not because a court had conclusively proven their crimes, but because politics had rendered their survival impossible. History is filled with institutions destroyed less by evidence than by circumstance. The Templars joined that melancholy list. Their properties, at least in theory, were transferred to another military order, the Knights Hospitaller. This seemed sensible. The Hospitallers continued defending Christian interests. They possessed similar religious goals. Many former Templar estates did indeed pass into Hospitaller hands. At least on paper. Reality proved considerably messier. Kings had already confiscated enormous quantities of property. Returning everything proved inconvenient. Some rulers delayed. Others quietly retained valuable estates. Philip himself recovered substantial financial benefits. One cannot help noticing that eliminating one's creditors while acquiring many of their assets represented a remarkably profitable political strategy. As if that could ever create unfortunate incentives. For ordinary Templar brothers, the consequences varied enormously. Some entered monasteries. Some joined the Hospitallers. Others retired quietly with modest pensions. A few disappeared into ordinary life. Imagine a man who had worn the white mantle for 30 years suddenly becoming simply another aging monk. No battles. No commandery. No familiar routine stretching back decades. Just silence. Identity, once lost, is remarkably difficult to replace. Yet not every brother accepted the outcome peacefully. A handful withdrew earlier confessions and publicly declared the order innocent. This required extraordinary courage. Retracting testimony could easily result in renewed imprisonment. Or worse. Several Templars who insisted upon their innocence were condemned as relapsed heretics. The punishment for relapse was severe. Execution by burning. One after another, small groups faced the flames rather than repeat confessions they believed false. History seldom remembers all their names. Perhaps it should. Then came the final chapter. Jacques de Molay, together with Geoffroy de Charny, another senior Templar leader, he remained imprisoned for years while proceedings dragged endlessly forward. Finally, on March 18, 1314, both men were brought before a public gathering in Paris. The authorities expected a simple formality. The prisoners would confirm earlier confessions. Sentences of life imprisonment would follow. The affair would quietly conclude. Instead, everything changed. Standing before assembled officials, Jacques de Molay did something completely unexpected. He publicly withdrew his confession. He declared the order innocent. He proclaimed that the accusations had been false. Geoffroy de Charny supported him. For Philip's government, this represented disaster. Public recantation threatened years of carefully constructed legal proceedings. The response came swiftly. Both men were declared relapsed heretics. No further delays. No lengthy appeals. Sentence followed immediately. Death by fire. That very evening, on a small island in the Seine River near Notre Dame Cathedral, wooden stakes were prepared. Crowds gathered. Executions always attracted spectators. The spring air remained cool. Smoke drifted gently above the river. Paris continued bustling around them. Markets closed. Boats crossed the Seine. Life continued. History often unfolds beside ordinary evenings. Chroniclers describe Jacques de Molay meeting death with remarkable composure. Some later accounts claim he continued proclaiming the innocence of the order until the flames consumed him. Others describe calm dignity rather than dramatic speeches. Separating legend from fact becomes increasingly difficult after so many centuries. Yet one detail remained especially famous. According to later tradition, de Molay issued a curse from the stake. He supposedly summoned Pope Clement V and King Philip IV to appear before God's judgment within a year. It is a wonderfully dramatic story, and like many wonderful stories, historians approach it cautiously. The earliest reliable sources mentioning such a curse appear only after the events. Contemporary evidence remains surprisingly thin. Still, an intriguing coincidence followed. Pope Clement died little more than a month later. Philip IV died before the year's end after suffering a stroke following a hunting accident. Their deaths fueled the legend enormously. Human beings possess a deep love for poetic justice, even when history merely offers coincidence. Soon stories multiplied. The curse expanded. Future generations embroidered additional details. Eventually, the destruction of the French royal line itself became linked to de Molay's supposed final words. Whether true or not scarcely mattered. The legend had taken on a life of its own. The Knights Templar were gone. Their last Grand Master had died in flames. Their estates dispersed. Their headquarters occupied by others. After nearly 2 centuries, one of medieval Europe's most powerful organizations had vanished. Or had it? Because endings, particularly famous ones, possess an extraordinary habit. People refuse to believe them. And when history leaves unanswered questions, legend eagerly steps forward to supply the answers. In the centuries that followed, whispers would spread across Europe. Perhaps the treasure escaped. Perhaps secret brothers survived. Perhaps the order continued in hiding. Perhaps the Holy Grail remained safely concealed. Perhaps, well, human imagination, once awakened, is almost impossible to imprison, and the greatest mysteries surrounding the Knights Templar were only just beginning. Fire leaves surprisingly little behind. By the morning after Jacques de Molay's execution, the smoke above the Seine had long since drifted away on the spring breeze. The crowd had returned to ordinary concerns. Merchants opened their stalls. Priests celebrated mourning. Massachusetts fishermen lowered nets into the slow-moving river. Paris had already begun forgetting. History, however, had not. Because there is a curious pattern that appears again and again whenever a powerful institution disappears suddenly. People begin asking questions. Not simple questions. Interesting ones. If the order possessed such enormous wealth, where did it go? If thousands of brothers served across Europe, did every one of them truly vanish? If they guarded the Temple Mount for generations, did they discover anything beneath it? And if no one could answer those questions with complete certainty, human imagination happily volunteered. The legends began almost immediately. Some were harmless. Others became astonishingly elaborate. A few eventually grew so famous that many people today know the myths better than the real history. Let us wander through them slowly, the way one might explore the dusty shelves of an old medieval library, carefully separating history from stories without losing appreciation for either. Perhaps the most famous mystery concerns treasure. The legendary Templar treasure. According to countless tales, the order possessed unimaginable riches. Vaults overflowing with gold, jeweled relics, sacred artifacts, ancient manuscripts, crowns, coins, enough wealth to rival kings. Then came the arrests. Royal officials searched Templar properties expecting spectacular discoveries. Instead, they found considerably less than later legends would suggest. Certainly, there were valuable estates, documents, money, equipment. The Templars were undeniably wealthy, but there was no single mountain of gold hidden beneath Paris waiting to be discovered. This disappointed treasure hunters enormously, so they proposed another explanation. Perhaps the treasure escaped before the arrests. A handful of later stories describe wagons leaving Paris secretly. Others speak of ships departing quietly from La Rochelle, one of the Order's Atlantic ports, carrying mysterious cargo shortly before October 1307. It is a wonderfully cinematic image. Moonlight glimmering upon dark water. Silent ships slipping toward unknown destinations. Hidden chests secured below deck. Unfortunately, reliable contemporary evidence remains frustratingly scarce. We know the Templars owned ships. We know they transported goods. We know some property undoubtedly escaped confiscation. Beyond that, certainty dissolves rapidly. Could valuables have been moved? Certainly. Did enormous treasure fleets vanish into history? The evidence simply does not allow us to say. Still, uncertainty possesses remarkable storytelling potential. Centuries later, treasure hunters searched forests, islands, castles, caves, and coastlines across Europe. Some searched Scotland. Others looked in Portugal. A few even crossed the Atlantic, convinced the treasure somehow reached North America centuries before Columbus. No convincing evidence has ever appeared. Yet the searches continue. Perhaps that says something beautiful about human hope. We, like believing mysteries, still wait patiently beneath the earth. Then there is perhaps the greatest legend of all, the Holy Grail. At first glance, the connection seems almost inevitable. The Templars lived near the Temple Mount. They protected pilgrims visiting Christianity's holiest places. Surely, storytellers reasoned, they must have discovered something extraordinary. The Holy Grail entered medieval literature during roughly the same centuries that the Templars flourished. Poets wrote of mysterious cups, sacred vessels, divine secrets. Eventually, fiction and history drifted together. By the 19th and 20th centuries, novels confidently portrayed the Templars as guardians of the Grail. Modern films enthusiastically embrace the idea. It makes excellent entertainment. Historically, the connection is remarkably weak. No medieval Templar document claims possession of the Grail. No contemporary chronicler describes them guarding it. The association developed gradually through literature rather than historical evidence. Still, one understands why people enjoy the story. The real Middle Ages often appear confusing. Legends offer satisfying certainty. Another enduring mystery concerns the Temple Mount itself. Remember where the first brothers established their headquarters. The former royal palace built upon what medieval Europeans believed to be the site of Solomon's temple. They lived there for approximately 20 years. Long enough, many later writers suggested, to excavate extensively beneath the platform. What might they have found? Ancient scrolls? The Ark of the Covenant? Sacred relics? Hidden chambers? Modern archaeology confirms that the Temple Mount contains extraordinarily complex underground structures developed over thousands of years. Cisterns, passageways, storage chambers, foundations. Yet there is no reliable evidence that the Templars uncovered miraculous treasures. Could they have explored beneath portions of the site? Certainly. Would curious human beings living atop one of history's most famous locations investigate underground spaces? Almost certainly. Did they discover world-changing secrets? History remains politely unconvinced. Sometimes the greatest mystery is simply that we wish there were one. Then came Scotland. Ah, Scotland. Few countries have welcomed Templar legends quite so enthusiastically. According to one popular tradition, surviving Templars fled north after the arrests in France. Scotland, the story goes, provided refuge because King Robert the Bruce had been excommunicated and therefore supposedly cared little for papal demands. Some versions even placed Templars fighting beside Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. The image is undeniably appealing. Hidden warrior monks emerging dramatically from woodland just in time to rescue Scotland. Unfortunately, contemporary evidence refuses to cooperate. No reliable records place organized Templar forces at Bannockburn. That does not necessarily mean individual former brothers never reached Scotland. People certainly traveled. Some undoubtedly sought refuge wherever they could. But the grand romantic narratives belong more to later storytelling than documented history. Perhaps no building has benefited more from these stories than Rosslyn Chapel. Built decades after the Templars disappeared, its extraordinary carvings inspired generations of speculation. Every unusual symbol became proof of hidden knowledge. Every mysterious decoration suggested secret societies. The chapel itself became almost a character within Templar mythology. Reality remains both simpler and no less fascinating. Medieval craftsmen delighted in symbolic art. Not every carved figure conceals an ancient conspiracy. Sometimes a stonemason simply enjoyed remarkable creativity. The legends grew even larger during the 18th century. Freemasonry emerged as a respected fraternal organization emphasizing moral philosophy, symbolism, and ritual. Certain Masonic traditions eventually incorporated stories linking themselves to the Knights Templar. It is important to distinguish carefully between symbolic inspiration and direct historical descent. Most historians find no evidence that medieval Templars secretly transformed themselves into Freemasons. Rather, later organizations admired the Templars' ideals and adopted elements of their imagery. History inspired symbolism. Symbolism gradually became mistaken for history. The process happened surprisingly often. By the 19th century, novels transformed the Templars into almost mythical figures. Romantic authors adored them. Secret tunnels, hidden vaults, lost bloodlines, ancient curses, forbidden knowledge. Every mystery somehow led back to men wearing white cloaks with red crosses. Then cinema arrived. Films introduced the Templars to millions who might never read medieval history. Some portrayed them heroically, others sinisterly. Some imagined them as guardians of sacred truth, others as conspirators manipulating world events from the shadows. One suspect's Hugh of Paynes would have found all this deeply confusing. His original mission had involved protecting frightened pilgrims from roadside bandits. 9 centuries later, fictional versions of his orders somehow controlled global conspiracies. History occasionally develops an unexpectedly vivid imagination. Yet perhaps the greatest irony is this. The real Knights Templar hardly require embellishment. Their actual story contains enough drama for a dozen legends. 9 poor knights, holy wars, desert castles, international finance, kings, popes, betrayal, political intrigue, public trials, a dramatic execution, the rise and destruction of one of medieval Europe's most remarkable institutions. Reality already feels almost unbelievable, and still, the legends endure. Perhaps because people sense something unresolved within the Templar's story. Not merely missing treasure, something deeper. How could an organization so respected disappear almost overnight? How could men once celebrated as heroes become condemned as heretics? How much of history depends not upon truth, but upon whoever possesses the power to define it? Those questions remain surprisingly modern, and perhaps they always will. Because the Knights Templar left behind something far more enduring than gold. They left behind uncertainty. And uncertainty, unlike treasure, never stops multiplying. Yet beyond the myths and mysteries lies one final story still waiting to be told. Not about secret vaults, not about hidden relics, but about the genuine legacy these warrior monks left to Europe and why, after more than 900 years, we are still quietly speaking their name. There is a quiet kind of immortality that has nothing to do with statues. Stone crumbles. Bronze turns green. Names carved into marble slowly soften beneath centuries of rain. Yet some ideas continue living long after every building associated with them has become a ruin. The Knights Templar discovered this without ever intending to. Long after their castles fell, long after their commanderies passed into other hands, long after the last white mantle disappeared from Europe's roads, the echoes remained, not because the order survived in secret, but because history itself remembered. If we step back for a moment, as though climbing a hill high enough to see the whole medieval landscape spread beneath us, the Templars begin to look rather different from the mysterious figures of legend. Instead of myth, we see innovation. Instead of conspiracy, organization. Instead of hidden magic, remarkable discipline. Perhaps that is even more impressive. Consider logistics. It is not a romantic word. No poet has ever composed a famous love song about supply chains. Few painters devote masterpieces to inventory ledgers. Yet armies depend upon them. Kingdoms depend upon them. Civilizations depend upon them. The Templars understood this centuries before many rulers did. They developed standardized administrative systems across enormous distances. Records moved efficiently. Resources were redistributed where needed. Personnel rotated between commanderies. Messages crossed Europe with surprising reliability. Today, such coordination seems ordinary. Airlines accomplish more before breakfast. Global companies manage offices on multiple continents. But during the 12th and 13th centuries, it bordered on revolutionary. Imagine a traveler riding from Portugal to the Holy Land. Wherever he encountered a Templar commandery, he found familiar procedures, similar rules, comparable accounting, recognizable leadership structures, a shared identity transcending local politics. In many respects, the order anticipated later international institutions. Not perfectly, not completely, but unmistakably. Then there was finance. Modern banking evolved through contributions from countless cultures and communities: Italian merchants, Jewish financiers, Islamic commercial traditions, royal treasuries, merchant guilds, and many others. The Templars formed one important part of that larger story. They demonstrated that trust itself could become infrastructure. A merchant no longer needed to transport enormous quantities of silver physically across dangerous roads. Paper, wax seals, reliable records, mutual confidence. These intangible things sometimes proved more valuable than gold itself. Today we transfer money with invisible electronic signals. The Templars accomplished something conceptually similar using parchment, horses, and remarkably careful bookkeeping. One almost feels sympathy for their accountants. Imagine balancing international financial records using quill pens while candles sputter beside you. One misplaced number could create astonishing confusion. And yet, remarkably often, it worked. Military organization also changed because of them. The medieval battlefield often revolved around individual nobles pursuing personal glory. The Templars emphasized collective discipline. Formation over impulse. Obedience over ego. Professionalism over spectacle. These principles sound almost modern. Not because the Templars invented military discipline. Many civilizations had long valued organized warfare. Rather, they embodied it with unusual consistency inside medieval Western Europe. Their influence extended beyond warfare. Architecture remembers them too. Walk through the ruins of Templar castles today. Even broken walls communicate confidence. Engineers designed overlapping defenses, massive gatehouses, deep cisterns, storage systems capable of sustaining long sieges. Every stone reflects practical thinking. Beauty existed, but function always came first. One imagines medieval architects occasionally smiling with quiet satisfaction. A perfectly positioned tower requires no explanation. It simply works. The Templars also remind us of something deeply human. Success contains hidden dangers. When Hugh of Paynes founded the order around 1119, the brothers possessed almost nothing. Their poverty protected them from envy. Their mission inspired admiration. Their simplicity strengthened public trust. Ironically, fulfilling that mission too successfully transformed everything. Donations multiplied. Estates expanded. Influence increased. Kings borrowed money. Popes granted privileges. What had once been a tiny brotherhood gradually became one of Europe's most powerful institutions. Power attracts attention. Attention attracts jealousy. Jealousy occasionally attracts catastrophe. The order did not fall because it became weak. It fell because it remained wealthy after losing the purpose that had justified that wealth. That lesson echoes repeatedly through history. Empires, corporations, political movements, military alliances, institutions built for one age sometimes struggle when the world quietly changes around them. The Templars never fully adapted after the permanent loss of the Holy Land. Perhaps no organization realistically could have. Then there is Jacques de Molay. History has transformed him into something almost symbolic. Not merely the last Grand Master, the last witness, standing between two eras. Behind him lay nearly 2 centuries of crusades, castles, vows, victories, defeats, and brotherhood. Before him waited a Europe entering an entirely different age. Stronger monarchies, expanding bureaucracies, increasingly centralized governments. The world of independent military orders had begun fading. Kings intended to rule directly. Institutions answering only to distant popes no longer fit comfortably within that vision. In some ways, Philip IV represented the future. The Templars represented the past. History does not always reward virtue. Sometimes it rewards adaptation. That may be one of its hardest lessons. And yet, if we judge purely by memory, who truly won? Philip ruled France powerfully. His dynasty soon encountered immense difficulties. His administrative reforms mattered greatly. Few outside historians remember their details. The Templars, meanwhile, vanished, officially erased. Their buildings confiscated. Their organization dissolved. Their leaders executed. 900 years later, millions still know their name. That is an unusual kind of victory. Not political, not military, cultural. Human beings continue asking questions about them because their story touches something universal. Faith, duty, loyalty, power, corruption, justice, betrayal. These themes never become outdated. Every generation rediscovers them. Perhaps that explains why novels continue appearing. Why documentaries fill television schedules. Why archaeologists still excavate Crusader castles. Why travelers stand quietly inside ruined chapels imagining white, cloaked riders crossing distant hills. The Templars have become part of our collective historical imagination. Sometimes accurately, sometimes enthusiastically. There is room to appreciate both. One need not believe every legend to enjoy the mystery, nor reject every story simply because evidence remains uncertain. History itself thrives upon curiosity. As evening settles over Europe once more, imagine the ruins scattered across landscapes from Portugal to Israel. A broken tower overlooking vineyards. A weathered chapel standing quietly beside an old road. Fragments of fortress walls catching the final golden light of sunset. Grass grows where horses once waited saddled before dawn. Owls nest inside towers where watchmen once scanned distant horizons. The wind moves gently through empty windows. Nature has reclaimed much. Time has reclaimed even more. Yet if you stand very still, if you allow the silence to settle, it becomes surprisingly easy to imagine footsteps echoing across ancient stone. Not ghosts. Memory. History itself possesses a voice. It speaks softly, never hurrying, inviting us to listen rather than merely observe. The Knights Templar were never superheroes. They were never flawless saints. They were not guardians of magical artifacts or masters of impossible secrets. They were human beings, brave at times, frightened at others, disciplined, ambitious, faithful, occasionally mistaken, capable of extraordinary sacrifice, capable, like all people, of ordinary weakness. Perhaps that makes them more interesting than any legend ever could. Because history's greatest stories are rarely about perfect heroes. They are about imperfect people trying to build something they hope will outlive them. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. The Templars built castles that became ruins, institutions that disappeared, roads that changed, kingdoms that vanished. Yet somehow, their story endured. And tonight, after wandering together through nearly 2 centuries of crusades, prayers, battles, betrayals, and quiet acts of devotion, perhaps we can leave them where every historian eventually must. Not inside conspiracy theories, not hidden beneath forgotten vaults, but beneath the same wide sky that watched them ride across the hills of Jerusalem so many centuries ago. The moon still rises over the Temple Mount. The Mediterranean still carries ships toward distant horizons. Church bells still echo through villages that once donated sons to the order. The wind still moves through the ruins of Acre. And somewhere, carried softly between history and memory, the story of 9 poor knights continues its slow journey through time. So as the candles burn lower, and the night grows quieter, let the old castles fade gently into darkness. Let the armor grow silent. Let the horses finally rest. And perhaps, somewhere beyond the last whisper of the wind, the old brothers in their white mantles ride once more, not toward glory, nor toward treasure, but simply